The Canadian Agri-Food Policy Institute is driving bold policy solutions for a resilient Canadian agri-food system and building a stronger future for Canadian agriculture. Visit capi-icpa.com to discover how.
Welcome to The Truth About Ag. Welcome to the Truth About Ag podcast, distributed under the Real Agriculture Media Network and powered by the Hebert Group of Companies. Remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Today, I'm excited because we get a little of both sides. We got Bryce Eger on, and I'm going to let you tell your story, Bryce. I don't want to take the thunder out of it, but I've got probably a different perspective on what I want from this podcast than Kristjan does. And part of it's the thought leadership side that I'm starting to see, especially with a lot of your blogs and stuff. So that's where I'm going to take it. But I know Kristjan's probably got a few other areas he wants to cover. But let's start off. Give us your background for those who don't know you, and give us kind of where you started, where you went, and what you're doing now.
Yeah, well, it's really fun to be here and see you two virtually, if nothing else. It'd be kind of fun to do this live too and throw stuff at each other, but that's okay. So I grew up in Moosomin, Saskatchewan, of course. I think that's how I know Kristjan. Our history goes back a little bit longer than most, and went to university in Brandon, got a degree in economics, was going to be a banker. Right. So what else are you going to do? Growing up in Moosomin, there's only a few industries aside from owning businesses, which, I grew up with, but decided that maybe I should look around a little bit. So peeked around, was lucky enough to have a friend that worked at the Students' Union at the university and said, "Hey, I'm going to give you a resume to Cargill." I said, "Okay, that's cool." So long story short, ended up getting hired by Cargill. My mama cried because I was going into the ag industry, and I was crazy enough to take a job that was paying me 2/3 of what working in the bank was going to pay me at the time. She thought I had lost my mind. And yeah, the rest was kind of history. Once I got into Cargill, I got very well educated on the industry, got a chance to do a myriad of different things, everything from sales and sales management, green merchandising, general management, got involved in a lot of really cool projects across the country and bounced around for the first 14 years or so of my career. And then in 2009, I got the opportunity to jump over and start leading the sales organization at Pioneer Hybrid. So was living in Ontario at the time. The head office for Pioneer was based in Chatham, Ontario, and got asked if I would come and continue to expand the sales organization for Pioneer. So the expansion in Western Canada, of course, accelerated. Did that for a few years, then got an opportunity to go back into general management, which was tons of fun. Got involved in research and development and seed production and all of that sort of good stuff, as well as the commercial side of the business. And then at one point I had my hand up and got asked if I was really going to put my money where my mouth was and go and help the seed production business. So I actually took a jaunt over into seed production, led our seed production organization in Canada, as well as global sunflower production based out of Woodland, California at the time. So that was a really neat opportunity. Then I got an opportunity to be the president of Pioneer Hybrid in Canada. The president of Canada at the time retired, and they came and asked if I'd take that over. Did that for about 3 months. And then the president of DuPont Crop Protection, DuPont, of course, owned Pioneer. The president of DuPont Crop Protection came and asked me, well, we've tried to get this thing to integrate for 15 or 16 years. We haven't been able to do it. So why don't you take on the crop protection business in Canada as well as the Pioneer Hybrid business? And so I did that. Little did I know that a few months later there was going to be an announcement about a merger between Dow and DuPont. So then that came, got working on that right away, then officially became we merged, we really announced in 17 and became Dow DuPont in 2017. And then in June of 2019, we officially became Corteva and was leading the Corteva business in Canada up until the end of 2023. So was the president there. And then took an opportunity to go and work in research and development. So took on a global vice president role based down in Johnston, Iowa, for seeds innovation and research and development. So my job was, I got to be a banker at the end of my career ultimately, right? I got to be the person that helped us decide where the money was going to actually go, help explain the business cases, worked with the board as well as a whole bunch of really, really talented research people to really figure out where the investment needed to be. And then, then I retired, or rewired, as I like to say, because I don't think anyone should ever retire. I rewired last year, moved back to Calgary, and started a company in February. Was literally walking on a beach, and a friend of mine said, "So what are you going to do?" And I said, "Well, I don't know." He said, "Well, you're not doing this. Like, this is not you. So what are you doing?" And came home, found out that it's really easy to start a company. Only takes a matter of hours, which I thought was going to take a couple of weeks. And yeah, the rest is history. Started a company, started doing some advisory work for a number of different organizations. And I'm just having a whole bunch of fun being in Calgary and being back in Canada. Got a chance to harvest at the family farm, at my in-laws farm, last harvest for the first time in 30 years, which was kind of cool. And yeah, and now I'm sitting here with you two.
So I'm gonna pull a few things out of that, and we can touch on each one throughout the podcast. But the first one, I love that all three of us ended up in careers that people told us we would fail at or we shouldn't do. Because I mean, Hebes, you tell the story of when you left the public accounting to become a farmer, which at the time everybody thought you were nuts, and I won't go through balance sheets today, but and then when I left M&P, I probably had 3 or 4 partners sit me down and ask me if I was crazy going to a family farm run operation as a side to be a partner at a public accounting firm. And then obviously your story with the banking versus agriculture. So that's kind of the first part. Second part, the retirement one, we're coming back to that one later in the podcast because I definitely want to hit on that one. But for me, and I'm going to take this left field off the start, Hebes, I'll let you bring it back later. So when I looked at your bio, Bryce, you were recognized among North America's top 15 management mavericks. And for that, that's the transfer for informational leadership side, that kind of what you're doing today, kind of the consulting advisory side. So, I mean, from an early part, where did the leadership, I mean, and obviously as you came up through the company and all that stuff, where'd you get your leadership style? And was it mentors? Was it just learning as you went, or where did that come from? Because I think a lot of our listeners, that's one of their biggest ceilings, I guess you could say, is how to become a real leader.
Yeah, let me think about that for a bit. I mean, openly, I think that a lot of it started right in school, right? Like growing up in a community where everybody knows who you are, and everybody talks at the coffee shop, at the Legion Hall, at the curling rink, at the hockey rink. I realized at an early age that there were always eyes upon you, right? There were always eyes upon you. And so that sort of set into process for me around watching the people in our community as a starting point who were leading different things, right? I was lucky enough to, I'll say have a relatively stable home life with my mom and dad. So I got to watch the way that they worked together in all of the businesses that they operated. I got a chance to interact with business people across the community. And then from there, it just sort of progressed as I got into my actual career. And what I learned is if you're willing to actually ask and try something, most cases people will give you a shot. And that sort of set a platform for me around what leadership was. Leadership was putting yourself out there, being willing to actually try something and willing to own it if it didn't go necessarily perfectly. So that sort of started. And then I was lucky enough when I got into Cargill, that was just the way that Cargill operated at the time that I was there. There was a transition that was going on in Canada. Kerry Hawkins was leaving the presidency of Cargill in Canada, and Len Penner went in to be the president of Cargill in Canada. And Len assembled a really, really wonderful leadership group within the organization in Canada. That was sort of the mid to late 90s. And the expectation was that you were going to take autonomy, right? there was nobody else sort of behind you to help you make decisions. There was lots of people that were standing beside you that you could lean on, but the expectation was that you were given ownership, and it really just continued from there. That was foundational. And then being willing to, really start thinking about what I thought leadership was, and observing people, making sure that I don't have a whole lot of status quo in me. So being restless was really easy, right? I have some components that I think about as leadership, and being restless with the status quo was really easy. Looking at how people were patient with people became a foundation. Communicating effectively in all directions, not just up or down or sideways, making sure that there's a clear message. So all of that became foundational. And then it just built as I got a chance to go and lead larger teams and take on more responsibility. Yeah.
No, and the reason I asked Hebes is because, I mean, we've seen a lot of people who say they want leadership or say they want that role until they actually get into the people side. And as Jeff says, HR would be easy without the people. So it's a question I got to ask, because it's all, it's a weak spot for a lot of us. Go ahead.
Well, and I think it ties into, some of the ways we think, but also a few of the podcast guests we've had of late. So, I think there's a few, to simplify it, I think there's kind of three main characteristics of the best leaders, right? One is I use the word curious. Bryce used the word restless. Same thing, right? Just not willing to accept status quo. And maybe you will end up accepting it, but you're going to question it. You're going to test it. You're going to try other things, right? The other one is the strategic kind of visionary, but that takes passion and it takes guts. So I used Lita's, podcast she did with us, and like she'd ask, is there an opportunity for me to try that? Even if she didn't think she was ready, because she believed that the people that were leading her had her best interest. And when it was time, they'd put her in that position and let her fail where it had to fail, but assume she'd have success. Right. But that's because they believe she could think big, and she was willing to, have some guts to maybe be wrong. Right. But then the last piece, and I think this is one of the most critical pieces of leadership that most people forget. And Heimbecker brought this up when we podcasted him, but I call it kind of the plumber gene. Like, there's only certain leaders that can actually get shit done and clean shit up, because it takes awkward conversations that you're not going to make friends. Like, it's the true definition of a boss is not always a buddy, right? And I believe personally that you get that by starting at the bottom, right? So when we interviewed John Heimbecker, Bryce, like he said, that the way they've he goes, I wish I could give you that we have this amazing way to figure out which parish or which Heimbecker might be the next CEO or who ends up in leadership positions. But one of the things is we just stick them in one of the worst elevators we can find in Canada for the first 2 years, and you find out who's serious about being here. And you go from cleaning out the boot of an elevator to working your way up to trading futures and being dead right one day and dead wrong. But like it's because they actually innately know a whole bunch of pieces of the business that they get stuff done, and people underneath them that are giving them solutions can't be self-fulfilling, right? Because the leader actually understands how it works and can understand if they're going outside the box or just trying to help themselves. And that plumber, I code named it plumbers, because when I'm in government meetings, I try not to swear, right? So that's the code word for get shit done. That plumber gene is what I think some, leaders are missing, whether that and kind of all vintages. But, from my time with you, that was kind of what I found your uniqueness was. You could think strategic like anyone in a room that you were in, but you had this innate ability of like following through on what you really felt needed done. And even if that created awkward situations, it's just what's right. And I think that's a key part of leadership. And personally, from the outside, I think that was one of the key strengths you had that some don't.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I think at one point I'll say that my wife and I are going to co-author a book, because I do think that there's something built into, and we're going to call it the chair stackers. You know what a chair stacker is? Okay, so you guys are from small communities.
Well, I got an idea. It'd be all the chairs at the Legion Hall, and then you go grab the little wheelie to put them underneath.
Who are the people that are there at the start of the night to put the chairs out, and who are the people that are there at the end of the night to take the chairs down? You need chair stackers.
I was waiting for the inspiration also. I didn't go there, but obviously it's too simple, right? Too simple.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, ultimately, that's for me, that's your plumber analogy, right? Like
Yep.
at a certain point, you have to be willing to do everything. It doesn't mean you do it all the time, but damn it, when you're looking at talent, find the people who actually had the stacked chairs. Find the people who actually, and that builds into a little bit. There's one of my favorite books is Range by David Epstein, right? And it's a wonderful book, partially because I see myself in it. So you always have a bias when you're just like, oh yeah, that's pretty cool. He's got it exactly right, because he talks about having this breadth of knowledge and understanding a little bit about a whole bunch of different things. But I really like the premise behind the book, because it gives people an understanding that you can be a subject matter expert, but your world is only as wide as what you kind of have the blinders off for. And if you only know, astrophysics right from top to bottom, but you don't know anything about business, you don't know how to even balance a checkbook, it becomes really difficult to be able to just dance across into that laneway and lead people that are across an organization. And so, yeah, you've got to have some breadth. You got to have some range in what you do.
I find it interesting. He was the last, obviously, like you said, we had John Heimbecker and Warren Kading and a few others on. And everybody believes that these guys at the top, and Bryce, I'm including in these guys at the top because obviously your former positions and stuff, but they all think they were just given this job, right? Like they don't know the backstory. And that was partially why we did the podcast to begin with, was Hebes and I wanted to get the backstories out, because it humanizes that people, like, everybody started at the bottom. Nobody was given the keys to the kingdom at the start. And it kind of quantifies, like you said, you had to do it all. You had to get through the leadership. You had to take the steps to get to that final position. And I've read a lot of your blogs since your retirement, or whatever, rewirement, I guess is what we were calling it. But like a couple of them, and I pulled the titles this morning, like be easy to do business with, be accessible, hire smart people, let them do their job. Like these are fundamental leadership principles that you learned, but not from a book. You learned them throughout your career.
Yeah. I wrote them literally in the forest in Pennsylvania, just outside Gettysburg, in 2004. Those tenets, that's when I wrote them. I was on a leadership development I had a leadership development opportunity when I was with Cargill, and one of the things we did was go to Gettysburg, go and reenact the Civil War battle at Gettysburg, and pick apart what the leaders messed up. And then we got sent off into the bush with a notebook and a piece of paper to write what we thought was leadership. And that scribble, it's still in a book behind me on my shelf. That scribble on that book were those tenets, and they've refined over time. My brain works a little bit differently, but the core of those 10 were, they were literally, I couldn't get you back to your reference back to where the heck I was, but I know that I was in a forest in Pennsylvania. So
it's one of the funny things, right? Is that I think too many people assume that CEOs are different when really they're not. Like Shout, how many times Shout keeps harassing me that one day when I'm old, we'll have to put a book together. But all he's done is, like he says, he jots down all the goddamn one-liners I live by, right? And then he has one-liners now, and Jeff has lots, but like it's just because we're simple people and I need to remember it. I can't have a paragraph. It's got to be easy, right? But I think one of the unique things, you and I can talk about is, I also think parents need to understand that conversations with your kids can lead them down more paths than you think, right? So I had a good conversation with a buddy yesterday, and he wanted to get his kid into investing. So I kind of explained to him with Bentley and Ivy, like, we have money in our TFSAs for them. And I set up a little fake portfolio on Google Finance that they can track it right from, Bitcoin to Whitecap, because it pays dividends, to a penny stock that's volatile. And, Bentley and I talk about it every week, and it was pretty cool to have that conversation. But then if I go back to my childhood, kind of the unique tie that Bryce and I have is his dad and my grandpa were literally like best friends. They golfed for years together, played canasta like once a month at least, right? And you think back as a kid playing with them, like all their conversation, my grandpa Schoolie and Cam, was not, it was not drama, and it wasn't bad mouthing people in the community. It was, Cam ran small businesses. My grandpa was we called him Avi. He was the general manager of the hospital. So like you had someone that was running one of the bigger businesses in town that's all unionized and had to deal with strikes and government and all that. And then you had Cam and his small businesses. And that's what they talked about all the time. They talked about finances. They talked about government grants. They talked about people and how to deal with them. And then then we'd have my grandma pipe in because she was a nurse. And like she actually crossed the line a couple times because she'd have all the email back then it wasn't email. She had the letters coming from the union, but then she lived with my grandpa. Right. Yeah. But that was all the conversations that was around the card table with Cam and Schoolie. And when you're 10 years old or 13 years old playing canasta with them, really all you're thinking about is how can you beat them at cards and at golf. But you don't understand actually how those conversations then drive a lot of how you think when you're older, the strategy of cards and the conversations they have. Cause like it was never normal for me to gossip. And to this day, it's still not. It drives me crazy, but the people I was around didn't do it. They talked business, they talked people, they talked strategy. And it might've just been like once they got sick of talking about business, they talk about how beating their wives in cards was fun, and how to do it. But that was the interesting part.
I want to take a pause from the podcast to call out one of our largest sponsors at The Truth About Ag, Farmer Coach. We have had the largest uptake in the program since its start in 2022 and are looking to have more than 100 producers in for the fall of 2025. We've opened up an additional executive program as our legacy cohort sold out earlier than it ever has in the past, and we are asking producers to reach out for availability. We have multiple new industry supporters this year. Love the industry when they jump on board with education. And they are sending some of their most progressive and young farmers into the program. Reach out to your lenders and your suppliers and ask if they're a supporter, and if not, why not? And lastly, and the most proud we are at Farmer Coach, we are entering our 4th year cohorts, and we have an 80% retention rate with that cohort. The original one has no industry backing. They came because they believed in what we were doing. And now as they enter their 4th year, they have made changes to their operations beyond what I ever thought was possible. So if you're not looking into the program, I ask that you hurry, as seats are filling up, and we want you to figure out your definition of success, and then let us and the other participants assist you in reaching it. The only real question left to ask is one day or day one. Now back to the Truth About Ag podcast.
Yeah.
Well, and the other interesting part, and I was gonna touch on it first, Hebes, is that I if this is the grandma that I met, I'm not surprised she crossed the line.
Yeah, Wanda would she didn't like losing, so Schoolie and Cam were pretty sharp, and so I can't speak for your mom, Bryce. I don't remember as much, but let's just say that Wanda was really good at finding the gray line in between black and white in card rules.
There's always a way. That's what you learn from that. There's always a way.
There's always a way. Yeah.
The other part that I find interesting, Hebes, and I can relate to this. I mean, you and I used to go to NHL games, for example. We hit a couple Stanley Cups, and back then the conversations were more around sports or around that side, where nowadays I don't have many conversations, whether at work or in personal with friends, that aren't related around business. And it's not because that's what we choose to talk about. It's just that's the passion, right? And that's where your head goes, and that's where the drive comes from. So I think part of the leadership thing is just it all ties back to that, right?
I think that to that point, just one last little thing, the most important part of it when you bridge it back between being a parent and a leader is the leadership role of a parent is the most important leadership role. It's the best badge that you're ever going to get, right? And you don't get to choose your kids, and you get the messiness that goes on in your own brain and in your spouse's brain, and all the rest of it all comes together. But it really is, leadership is about actually caring for the people that you work for, and that you're there to serve. And I know servant leadership gets thrown around and people hate talking about it, but the truth is that it starts with the communication that Kristjan talked about. It's actually talking talking to your kids, talking to your team, and coming from a place of, okay, how are we going to make this better? But also, how are we going to make sure that you understand what we're trying to get done? And if you start from that foundation, typically leadership is not that difficult as long as you can stay true to that. It's not perfect, and it never is. It's messy because you don't have a history book on everybody that you get a chance to work with over your career. But
and that was the biggest part. I mean, and Heaves, you warned me when I came across, is like the entrepreneurship side. All of a sudden, you're not just responsible for your own family. Like, it was easy working 9 to 5 and you knew where the money was going. Now, all of a sudden, it's okay, I got to come up with the next idea, or I have to figure out how to get this to be accomplished or successful, because now there's other families relying on me. And that was not something I'd ever even dawned on me before coming back to the business.
I think too that that communication part, Bryce, I think it's always interesting. We always talk lots about team sports, right? It's actually one of our interview questions. Like, if you play team sports, it bumps you up the list on our categories, and really it's just because you understand how to work with other people, and that you have to, whether or not you agree on everything, and that different skill sets are important, right? Like, if the other team has a breakaway, it doesn't matter if you have a 50 goal scorer. Your goalie's kind of important at that moment in time. But you also need to have those awkward conversations to hold people accountable and push them to where they need to be. And I always think, kind of my simple statement there all the time is like, I should be able to have an awkward conversation and ask somebody to be at their best, or push them to their best, or hold them accountable. And I've never crossed the line, as long as that night at midnight, if they hit the ditch and it's minus 30 and snow, they trust me enough to phone me to have me be the one to come get them. Right. And I think some people forget that is you communicate, you got to share all the good things, but as the boss, you still got to hold people accountable and push them. But if you're always respected enough to be on that short list of people that if they're truly in trouble, they'd phone, that's what you have to maintain on good days and bad days. Right. And it's a simple little rule, but I mean, you lived in Mooseman too. It's not an abnormal thing that you're going to get stuck once a winter and you need a hand from somebody. Yeah. And we only have 3 or 4 people on that list that we'll call. And if you're on that list for your team, I think you've done a good thing.
Yeah.
Okay, let's pull it out of this side, because obviously there's a lot of Bryce's past and his past jobs and stuff that we want to touch on. So, Heaves, I want to start, and for me, it was going back to one of those leadership, honestly, those blogs that actually ties to across, is the be easy to do business with. And I mean, Kristjan, we've had the conversation a whole bunch of times, that's one of our biggest, not complaints, but it's one of our biggest issues that we've had lately, is that the suppliers don't know how to grow as the producer side of the industry is growing. So, I mean, from looking at it from that leadership principle and looking at it from your past with Corteva, what does that mean to you, the be easy to do business with part?
Yeah. So ultimately it means put yourself into your customer's shoes and think about, okay, so how could we actually make this a little more simple? How could we make it so that it's easy to transfer knowledge, it's easy to understand what the value proposition is for a product or service? That's important. And then the other part of it would be, look at your own systems within your organization and try and decouple them, try and break them to the point where you're getting it from a 10-step process to a 2-step process or a 3-step process. And that becomes easier not only to do business with, but it becomes easier to explain. The less hurdles that you have in the way that you're trying to operate your business, the easier it is for you not to have to hurdle. Because if you don't have to hurdle, I'm not a hurdler. So if you don't have to jump over walls and climb over rocks, it becomes easy to do business with. So that for me is starting with what you're trying to do from a strategy standpoint, and then trying to work back and simplify. The tough part, and I'll say this for Corteva, I'll maybe even speak a little bit for some of the other publicly traded companies. There are things that I would love to do and that I guess I can do now as an entrepreneur, that when you're publicly traded, you just end up in challenges to be able to do. Simplicity sometimes is thought of as risk, and because there aren't enough checks and balances in place. So that is one of the challenges that sometimes comes into play from my experience with some of the larger publicly traded organizations, there's just some things that they cannot just go and do as simply as they would like. But yeah, that's what it means to me.
And I mean, we've talked about the agility of some of the large corporations that we deal with versus, we can shift direction. We can move very quickly as a small enterprise. But what we find is one of our biggest issues is when we start working with bigger enterprises is exactly as you said, there's a lot of red tape. There's a lot of process. It's just a very slow, long game, right?
I heard one of the best analogies I've heard about this in a long time. The premier was out the other day in Mooseman, and people asked him, about changing things faster. He said, you just picture a business as a big wheel rolling down a mountainside, right? And if you're part of a publicly traded company or a government, your job as the leader is like to lean on one side of the tire or other and change the angle a little bit. Because if you try and stand in front of it, it's ran over a lot better people than most leaders, right? You just can't. Where as entrepreneurs, like that wheel actually has two wheels. It's a motorbike and has a steering wheel. Like we can turn around and drive backwards if we want. We can do it in a matter of maybe not in 24 hours, but we can change a lot of things in a week. And that's impossible for publicly traded companies and governments. It's not, right? They might be trying to get to the same destination as us, but they just got to change the angle just a little bit and maybe change the pay scale and the bonus structure of their team to change behavior, to follow the strategic vision to get there, right? It's not even a chess match because it's a chess match that lasts a decade or at least the tenure of that CEO. And so it's probably why I'm not in publicly traded companies or government, because I'd probably be fired faster than I got hired. But it takes a unique skill set to be able to do that.
Yeah. I got thinking as you were talking, Kristjan, and coming back to the question you asked earlier on, Evan, around lessons from, different stages of career. And one of the lessons that I did learn definitely coming through the pioneer side of the business was you need entrepreneurs in your company, regardless of whether you're a sole proprietorship or owning your own business or you're part of a large conglomerate. You need entrepreneurial thinkers in your company. And in the absence of that, you don't progress because there's an innate sort of ability of an entrepreneurial mindset to just say, okay, we're going to take forward progress. Like we're going to figure out how to step forward. We're not going to wait. And that fits back into the, restless for the status quo. But it really is, if I think about it, it's entrepreneurs. You need entrepreneurs in your organization, and you have to find ways to attract them and retain them, even in the larger companies.
Well, and that's what we found is I think the definition of an entrepreneur, most people believe it has to be, I run the company, I own the company, I make every decision. Like they always go towards that side of the entrepreneurial scale when it actually isn't. It's the mindset side. It's the thinking. It's the free thought. It's being part of an organization that allows you to do that, right? Like it's always dawned on me a bit that you didn't have to be that guy at the top just to be an entrepreneur. It's just, that's what we always define it as, right? Like that's how we label it.
Yeah.
Well, in most cases for those of us, that are farmers working with the companies, your goal should be to find that person in the company that you can have a win-win relationship with, that a better customer, partnership with your farm is good for their career and good for you. Because then they're willing to try and make change that's good for both of you inside those companies, right? Like you actively should be trying to seek out, we call them intrapreneurs, right? You actively should be trying to seek them out because they think the way you do. It's going to be less frustrating. And there's a lot of ways that you can work together inside the rules that they have to follow. There's a number of ways to be able to work together that lots of people just never explore.
Well, and that easy to do business with, most people, especially from the primary production side, always believe it's Corteva's job to be easy to do business with. Or they never come at it from the other side of, have we ever asked what would make your life easier that we could do? And I think we've touched on this on a couple of podcasts, but it's an interesting dynamic that we're always asking for more from the companies, but we're never willing to have the conversation of what are we doing wrong or what are we doing that's making your guys' job harder and how can we change? Because usually those are much quicker and much easier shiftable adjustments, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think the one easy conversation to have there, Bryce, right, is that How many times do you and I hear that farms should just be able to buy direct? And I'm not even saying personally that I disagree. However, I'm not sure most farms understand some of the rules that would have to be around that, because you can't have that many customers as that big of a client. But it's not even the customers. It's in order to do that, as farmers, are you ready to have next year's crop plan 90% done by September of the year before? Are you willing to book, let's call it even 80% of your products by October of the year before? And are you willing to take them anywhere between October and April into your heated storage shed that's certified? Because if you don't want to pay for it right when it shows up, then you're going to have a government certified shed that this big company that can then put a lease agreement on or something to help you with payment terms like they do at retail. And most farms, they actually just want the lower price, right? They think there's a bunch of margin, and I won't debate that today, a bunch of margin between the manufacturer and the retail and them. But there's 3 or 4 other key pieces. And most farms, lots of farms don't have their crop plan ready for next year, even to a percent, right? They definitely don't have a heated shed to be able to take it whenever. And the other thing too is like, you can't return everything if you're wrong. There might be a little limit, but it can't be like, oh, I'm just gonna order 5,000 acres of wheat and then decide not to grow wheat in April and take it all back. Like, that doesn't work in a direct to farm model. And so it's those key pieces of easy to do business with, and we call it win-win, right? Every decision and every contract you sign, it has to end win-win so that you can do the next one and still be excited about it, right? Because if it's win-lose, you only get maybe one of those to try again. After that, people are just like, this group doesn't care about me.
Right. Well, and to that point, I mean, we're all human, right? So when we're on if you're on the losing side of the ledger, there's only so many losses. Like, you can go back to your sports analogy. There's not very many players that will say, you know what, pay me a whole bunch of money and I'll just be on a losing team. I really want to do that. I just want to get paid a whole bunch and just sit around here, make a bunch of money and never win. I mean, McDavid, what did he undervalue himself by? 25, 30, 40%? Just because he believes that he can win and that team will be able to win. Well, that's the perfect example. He wants to win, and I'm gonna create room so that you can hire some more really talented people to help us win, because that's really important. So, I mean, I know people will say, "Oh, but he's already making millions of dollars." Right, I get it. This is just the principle of, it's about, okay, what are we going to do to be able to enable a win-win relationship? So,
Kiprusoff and Eichel were making a lot of money too, and they just signed for more than him, and they're not as good as him, right? Like, but I mean, like, one of the original, I mean, I'm sure it happened back in the day too, but I mean, with Tom Brady's books and his retirement, it all came out. Like, you look at, not only did he take discounts, he actually allocated the discount to his offensive line. Right? It's like, I think people overspend on quarterbacks and underspend on the offensive line, and I don't run that good. So we need to shore this up, right? Like, they, to the point that they wanted to build, but actually helped in the strategy on how to build it.
Yeah. Well, and let's be fair, you can tie that back to companies, right? Some of the best leadership strategies we've seen are essentially bringing on the right people and having them come along for the ride on the compensation side, even though you might make less, because in the end, the whole is bigger, right?
Yeah.
I tell everybody all the time, Jeff and you made way more money than me for years because I never paid myself.
Do we want to go back to the last 10 years in real estate? Because I'm just gonna keep that one to myself. Okay. So let's jump into the industry and the strategy side a little bit. Obviously, being CEO of Corteva and that side, I just want to know what's your view on the biggest opportunities that we can see for some of the producer side. Like, I know you're sitting on the retail side, but what do you see as some of those things that the producers are going to come up in the next decade that you see as huge opportunities?
Oh, let's see. So if I think about where things are at today, I would say the next 10 years, there's got to be some integration. I'll say rapid integration of all of the information that's available. And if I could really get the farms of today thinking about being tenacious in accepting the new technology and the new way of doing things and deploying it as rapidly as they possibly can, I think that they have to. And that includes AI, That includes taking all the information. I mean, the data that's available. I've heard this from a few different farms, a few different people that I know. I have all this data and I don't know what to, I don't know what to do with it, or I have all this data and I never get to actually analyzing it. Well, just do a 360 in a room by yourself and ask who's going to do it for you. Like, it's you. You got to go do it, right? And I know that it doesn't mean that you have to physically do it. It means that you have to find somebody who will help you to be able to actually do that, because there's so much information that can make you more productive, but you have to be able to actually, rather than just sitting on the side of the desk, you have to actively go and get that shit done. Like, and it can make a huge difference. You think about the ability to influence what's going on an acre by acre basis, or even a 10 acre block by 10 acre block basis on your farm. Like, get busy doing that. Don't wait for somebody else to oversimplify it. Sometimes you gotta stack some chairs, right? You have to.
I want to take the next few moments to call out another one of our sponsors, Maverick Ag. New look, new team, new location, and new outlook on agriculture. We've spent the last 6 months adding key people and processes to the Maverick team so we can better support the industry in what we see as complex yet exciting times. Our core consultants are the best in their fields across accounting, banking, consulting, and insurance, and we would love the opportunity to show you our horsepower. Some of our legacy products include the core financial product. Are you looking ahead, seeing financial ceilings at every turn? The markets, the cost of production, the banks. We provide a full-fledged projection package that covers your monthly cash flow worries, your bank ratios, your key performance indicators, your cost of production, and your profitability metrics. Fail to plan to fail. Don't go into 2026 without a plan. Number 2, Navigator Strategy product. Do you feel like Groundhog Day is every day on the operation? Are the complexities of managing family, roles, accountabilities, people, compensation, and just the sheer number of decisions you're expected to make becoming a stressor? Are you running the business, or is the business running you? Let our experts sit down with your family and your team and come up with strategies that work. We don't consult on things we've not seen success on in our own operation or those operations that we work with. Let us steer the ship in the right direction. Along with these offerings, we also have other numerous technology, negotiating, insurance, and decision-making products available. Visit maverickag.com for more details. Now, back to the podcast. And that was the interesting part, because it actually ties. I had a client phone yesterday, and they wanted to talk about AI, because obviously it's kind of the new trend, or whatever you want to call it. But when they saw AI, it was all about the capital investment and the equipment side, and he's like, where's this going? Like, how do I get ahead of it? And it was, you're looking at it from a different perspective. Like, for me, especially, and this might seem biased, but being on the consulting side and the financial side, AI in our business structure and the business side of agriculture, whether you want to call it office work or however you want to call it, that to me is going to be the first step, and probably one of the biggest, is that, as you said, getting down to the per acres and stuff. That's where most guys don't have the information analyzed. And that's the easiest place to start when you start talking AI, of how do you get the information out of the machines into your QuickBooks, into Dext, and those are simple. Like, those are steps that don't take a lot of capital, which guys always complain. We always talk about the equipment and the technology side is expensive. No, this is a very small investment that will get you the information to make decisions that could save you or make you millions of dollars, even on small scale.
Yeah. We've relied on, how would I define it? We've relied on experience base to drive our decisions, and we have to start using the proactive automated modeling to drive our decisions, right? We're not all that different in age, but I mean, when I started in the industry, it was sort of, well, you tried things multiple times. In some cases, it was 3, 4, 5 years before, and we needed to have that experience. Now there's this aggregate ability, this ability to aggregate data and experience from across the industry. And a lot of it is open source. I mean, there's not very many farms that I've been engaged with that when you ask them a question, you say, how are you doing that? Most guys are willing to share, right? It's not, so it's the information is all there. And rather than saying, well, I've got to experience it exactly on my farm, well, why don't we just talk amongst a network of people and let's figure out what's working. It's not going to work on every soil type. We know that. Like there's all of those, there are some variables there, but damn it, the information's there. So let's get going.
We're even seeing it this fall, Hebes, like guys are coming in talking yield numbers and yeah, compared to the last 5 years, like I'm way higher. And it's like, no, we need to analyze this data because all of a sudden the pricing is considerably lower. And what we're finding is you're below budget. And it's that thought of the reactive versus the proactive, where by looking ahead and looking at the projections and seeing that stuff, you're 100% correct, is that with AI and such, we get that you don't have to make the gut decision going forward, but you're not using bad information from the past either, right?
Yeah.
I think on the AI side, right, so having the exact same client phone me last night while I was driving, right? And
of course he did.
Yeah, and so there was kind of two pieces I said. I got to experience some of this when I was consultant down in San Fran, and it surprised me back then, and it surprises me more and more right now. But there's two pieces in agriculture that everybody needs to understand that we need to fix. Point number one is be very careful the data you let into your AI models, because there's a lot of good open source soil data out there that you can use, and there's a lot of good open source fertilizer data you can use, and you can use a lot of the good chemistry data from companies, certain ones. However, there is a lot of salesmanship data on the internet where if you let that load your AI, large language model, it's just going to tell you use these 10 jugs and you're going to find 50 more bushels of canola. It's not going to happen, right? So be careful what data you let in. And then the biggest hurdle, and to be honest, Evan, right, it's one of the reasons we have Maverick. I don't know how long I've been talking about large language models and data, but we got to have enough good data to fill it like H&R Block did with tax returns, is the financial data in agriculture is piss poor. And so the one piece we're missing on a lot of this soil data, chemistry data, fertilizer data is the actual truth test of, did that translate to profit per acre, profit per field, profit per entity? And I think what we have to get it down to is, profit per RM or profit per section. And once we can prove that financially, with today's world of equipment location and Dext for invoices and QuickBooks and Ag Expert Online, we're getting super close, where now we can prove it financially. And so I said to him, I think the first two steps in AI are, the first one is you got to start trying to teach one who you are, right? And we're lucky because we got lots of content. I said, what if you're down in Texas watching your kids play ball, or you're over in Paris on a vacation with your wife? What if your farm group could just go on their phone and ask whatever your personal GPT or Gemini is, hey, what would we do right here after they take a picture? And it's already preloaded. Like your SOPs can be a live AI bot, and it can be right 90% of the time, because it could be learning from you all the time. He was like, Jesus, I never thought of how easy and how much time that would take off my phone. Yeah, like a lot. And then the second one I said is we can think of all the analyzing data and how it's going to change how we do things. And I think it will, as we correlate soil group. Like really, we need the type of soil you have from your soil test. We need the amount of water you get in a year and the amount of heat you have in a year. And then we can correlate farms really all over the world, right? And that'll get super interesting. But in the interim, it's like, what if you could just lift your phone up and say, hey, anybody, and I use the Maverick network, Evan, right? So let's say there's 50 farms that sign up for this next level AI first. What's the network paid for diesel in the last 2 weeks? And all of a sudden it's 7 cents a liter. There's a couple 7 cents a liter cheaper than yours. Now you get curious and try to find out where that's from, right? What's FOSS trading at based on world markets, price at NOLA, and within the network? And you have that data at your fingertips to make you a more knowledgeable negotiator.
And that's where most don't realize you can actually use closed source AI products. So, I mean, like we actually have an AI internally that will use our data. So it's not going out, it's not getting the bad data from other, it's literally built to our system. So it'll pull from our client base, it'll pull those numbers so we know they're true and we know it's good data. The other one is if we've got consultants in different provinces or different areas, we don't all consult the same. I mean, like even you and I, Bryce, if we were talking to the same client, we would have a totally different discussion. But we've now got the ability that Kelly can go out and he can say, what would Evan say to this same question? And it'll actually go through the podcast. It'll go through all of our thought leadership and it'll say, this would be the opinion from Evan, which might be a little more risky than what a different consultant has, But he now has both perspectives, so then the consulting's better.
Yeah, and the important part, I think you both touched on it, is as these models are built, you trust but verify, right? You have to continually validate that what it's providing is as accurate as it possibly could be. And Kristjan, you used a 90% number, right? Like if it's 90% accurate, shit, if somebody could tap something and say that I was going to be 90%, 90% accurate most of the time, I'd go all in on that, because, that's pretty damn good. But the important part is to continue to validate it, because there's always going to be new information that's coming in. And I like the way that you're thinking about that. That makes a lot of sense.
Well, it goes back. I've always said that my goal on our own farm, and when Evan and I founded Maverick, was the end goal is to turn farming into blackjack, right? There's always going to be an odd we don't know with the overturned card. That's known as Mother Nature, and I would also add policy into that now, right? Mm-hmm. But if at any time my crew has the odds card, just like you can print off in blackjack, like if we have a king and the dealer has a 6, just say yes and go with it. The odds are high enough that I trust you, go. But then once you know those odds, then it's easy to build ditches. So like we just said, like anything over 90%, you automatically say yes. Anything over 75%, have another look at, make sure it's right, then say yes. Anything from 60 to 75, you need to talk to Kristjan about, right? Anything under 60, I probably need to make the decision because there's too much gut feel. But there are a lot of decisions that range between 75 and 100.
Yeah.
Right. That currently keep getting fed up because we haven't made these ditches. And that's the exciting part. Is it the true power of AI isn't to replace people, it's to empower people. Mm.
And part of it is it takes the emotion out of it, like especially in agriculture. And I don't want to harp on ag and put it as a negative, because honestly, emotion is probably a good thing in some forms of business. But the big one for me is, especially when we talk expansion, the price of land today, and the number on the balance sheet is what scares the guys. It's okay, the debt number is approaching, let's call it a $5 million deal, or a $10 million, or even a $1 million for some operations. It's just unthinkable. But what they don't realize is those 3 ratios with the banks, that's what keeps me up at night. If those are all in the green, the number on the balance sheet, I mean, what do you think Tesla or Amazon has as a debt number sitting on their balance sheet? It's astronomical. But in the end, as long as the ratios work and you have the green light, much like the blackjack card, there's no stress, because we're sitting in the right spot. Oh, and we have a runway because these aren't 1-year ratios, they're 3 to 5. So you have, and then here's your insurance policy. Like the data is there already. It's AI that'll actually put it together. So within 5 seconds on your phone, it's going to say, nope, you can take this deal because all the ratios look good. All your projections look good for the future. This is what it does to your cost structure. Like the timing of data is what I find most exciting about AI. Because for now, it takes us a week or 2 weeks to build a projection and get those numbers to our clients. What if it was real time, instantaneous, that I'm taking on 5,000 acres, here's the price, and it says, no, you are not taking on 5,000 acres because it goes backwards or you can't handle it, right? That's where my excitement comes. But
I don't know if I like this anymore, Shout. That's like one of my competitive advantages, making big deals live and just gut feel and quick math in my head.
Yeah, you better monetize it real quick because that's where we're taking it.
Hey, I want to pivot to a couple of questions that I wouldn't have asked you near in depth when you were in your old positions, but I sure will now.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So you and I, you better than me know the split between, say, generic and non-generic chemicals from, let's say, specifically Brazil to the U.S. to Canada. And Canada still runs the heaviest, non-generic mix, right?
Yeah.
Evan and I have seen enough break evens already for 2026. Like we said, some of these big yields aren't even going to get guys to a profit in 2025. 2026 looks worse because we're not starting with reasonable prices.
Right.
We're not saying they won't get there, but like, to make your crop plan to just break even right now for 26 is tough, which means we are probably going to see farms make some decisions on how to cut. My exact number was I'm dropping my cost of production $50 an acre at our farm. And if I'm doing that, I got a sneaking suspicion lots are going to do that. We both know there's a couple easy ways, right? Some guys are going to quit using potash and go to generic chemicals. Like it's the first 2 that farmers look at. So give me your roundabout opinion on how this market's going to play out in Canada over the next decade, and knowing full well that I'm a big supporter of R&D and that it worries me that we haven't found a new glyphosate since 1950 something, like really
Right.
worries me. So we can't have R&D end, but there's got to be a path to have both through licensing fees and data agreements, et cetera, doesn't there?
Yeah. Well, and I think that speaking specifically on the crop protection side of things, it has been a very, very difficult introduction of new chemistries. I mean, there really hasn't been anything unique. I know that there's lots of new products that have come on that are a little more efficacious. They do work better, but ultimately we're playing with the same groups, right? There's a lot of similarities, and it's naturally going to happen everywhere else in the world. We've got more off-patent products. I like using off-patent because I think that there are pure generics, and then there are value-added off-patent products. And I think one of the things that will continue to be important is, so how do we develop with off-patent products that stabilize use patterns, that continue to do the things that we need to do, that help us manage resistance, in the interim trying to bring in new technology. So, that said, under the window of off-patent products are going to continue to, I'll say, grow in the marketplace, I think that the opportunity is for the grower is to really, really, again, utilize the data that they have, as well as the data that they can source to be able to make the right decisions to maximize what they're going to do from a productivity standpoint. They have to do that. And nothing against any of in fact, being part of Corteva for a long time, I see how much effort and resource goes into trying to create the next new product. It's not for lack of investment. I'll say that 100%. And when you look across the industry, everybody is trying. All of the major life science companies are trying to find the next active ingredients that are going to be difference makers for the farm. But in the interim, we also have to be able to manage, to your point, the cost and the cash flow of the operation. And you have to have the places where you can be 90% correct, and the places where you need to be 95% correct. You have to be able to actually think about that really, really strategically on where you're going to invest to ensure that you've got the maximization of that productivity. And in some cases, you're going to go to post-patent products and post-patent pricing because it's a requirement today. We're not in a world where you can just spill stuff on the ground and we're all going to make $100 an acre. That's not how this works right now. Excuse me.
And if I remember when we first started talking about, I see you put an announcement on LinkedIn that you're I can't remember, it's an advisor to Vive or on the board or et cetera. Anyways, you're working with them.
Yeah.
And there's no hiding it. Amertech One has an investment in them. So I know quite a bit about them. One of the interesting conversations we had about, say, a company like Vive, where I felt I learned lots from you, was how you explain that, in the world of where there's been all this investment and the difficulty of PMRA at the time or now or period, that new formulations and ways to increase efficacy and productivity through formulations was the one way you thought it could become significantly more value to the farmer versus new groups. Now we all want new groups. It's just
right.
That's kind of like hoping and wishing, and eventually one will come true. Where you kind of felt that formulations were a strategic way where you can see advancement in it. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah. So we're going to see, we'll see a trickling of new products, new actives that'll come into the marketplace. But ultimately, you think about, okay, so how do we make sure that the products that we have continue to work? How do we make sure that they're working in the intended way? And how do we actually, brighten them up a little bit, shine them up so that they're even doing a little bit better job? Well, the one way that I learned with a little bit of time in research and development and then watching it real time previous in my career in the field is, well, they have to do what they're intended to do when they're actually put into large scale operations. It's great that they can do wonderful things in a lab or in small plot, but how do they operate when they get put onto, you know, Hebert grain. How does it operate across that many acres with that many different operators, that many different machines? And the one way that you shine that up is you continue to formulate, you continue to refine. And the thing that's been interesting, so I'm an executive advisor with Vive. Full disclosure, that's what caught me and what it interests me is I've been watching them for a number of years, right? Because they had, before I had left the Crop Life Canada as the chair or even as a board member, Vive had started to be thinking about joining, right? They weren't really commercial at the time, but they were thinking about joining Crop Life, and it sort of piqued my interest. What is this stuff? What are they doing? And ultimately, what led me to say, okay, I'm interested in helping. There's a couple of things. One, they're a Canadian company, so born and bred in Toronto at U of T, and two, the pathway for not only the current term but for long term is to continue to refine how we're formulating and continue to make products that actually can do the things that they need to do. And then you take that technology that, in this case, that Vive has, and you figure out, well, how do you take these biological products that the challenge is actually getting them to do what they need to do in the field, right? You got live things in a jug, and that always presents challenges. Well, if there's a way that you can formulate something so that what you put in the jug at the time you put it in the jug, and a few months later when you go and apply it to the field, it does what it's supposed to do. Well, that's the efficacy gap that happens quite honestly in most biological products. It's not that it didn't work when it was put in the jug. It's that by the time it gets to the field, you've got a gap in the ability for it to do what it's supposed to do. So formulation presents the next real opportunity to not only stabilize what we have, but also continue to refine for the future. And then the last point I'd make is there's a lot of relatively good chemistries that maybe didn't perform to the level that were wanted on the farm and maybe got shelved or got pushed over because of some formulation challenge. It could have been gummed up things in the tank, or didn't have proper rain fastness, whatever. Well, that's a formulation opportunity. So how do we build better formulations? And so ultimately, that's what a company like Vive, and there are others out there, so don't get me wrong, but that's what a company like Vive can do with their crop protection products, is really, really take very, very good active ingredients, just make them a little bit better.
See, and Hebes, that's the part that always scares me a little bit. And whether it's our discussion in AI or discussion in formulas or R&D or guys using generics and not putting money back into the path of R&D, we're losing some of the thought leadership in my eyes. And that to me is probably more risk, not just to the producer side, but also to the industry side, is what happens when we all believe that we don't have to have free thought anymore and we're using past thought to make future decisions, right? Like that's always been the part that scares me, especially on the AI side, just being our business model.
But I think also questions. So like the being curious part. So I mean, there's the post patent is a good way to put it. I think a lot of guys just assume that a generic is a generic, right? And it's all the same. It's not. I also think most people haven't spent the time to understand, like for some of these post-patent chemicals to get to market, like you have to buy data agreements from the companies that have done it or negotiate data agreements to prove that it's going to work. And so I think just trying to better understand the pathway for there being both in the industry that's fair to both sides, that we can have access to some of the post-patent stuff at a lower price, but also we need the higher price, but some of that's going to be through data agreements and partnerships in order to get it past government regulations. A lot of people don't take any time to even understand that. They just think when it goes off patent, I can just buy it from China and it shows up. And that's not how it works.
Yeah, and what you're doing on the farm is you've got a recipe, right? Mm-hmm. And you've got ingredients in that recipe that you're able to say, you know what, I can turn this dial a little bit. I don't need as much of this, or I can replace it with something. Do I want an original equipment manufacturer part, or does a does a bearing that's coming from the same factory that's in a different package do what it needs to do? Well, those are all decisions that really make up the nice ingredient list and ultimately make the recipe to hopefully get to black ink at the bottom of the page, right? That's what the goal is. Manage as many of the controllables as you can.
100%. It's really hard to go broke if you never lose money, right? But it's all the decisions to get there that's the tough part.
Yeah.
Okay, we've kept Bryce over an hour here, Heath. So let's wind it down a little bit. I've got one question, and then I'll let you flow into your last ones.
Yeah.
So for mine, and just going to the more personal and reflective side, Bryce. So what's the one challenge that you learned the most as CEO at Corteva or in your current career? And then how do you balance everything? Because I mean, I've got a lot of producers that if I showed you their timesheets would scare anybody. So obviously being the CEO of Corteva, being that side of the business, doing all that stuff, how did you balance your work, your family, and your life in agriculture?
Okay. So if I think of, so say the first part again, Evan, just so I'm thinking of it correctly.
What's the one challenge that you came across that taught you the most, if that makes it easy for you?
Okay. You know, the biggest challenge that I had is I got a gift when I was 43 years old. And that gift was a bout of depression. And then a few years later, I found out that I had ADHD. So literally 3.5 years ago, I found out I had ADHD, and 8 years ago, I had a pretty bad bout of depression. I was really good out in front of people. It was the one thing that I could actually put all of my energy in for 10 to 12 hours a day. And then I would come home and go to bed. And I didn't know what was going on. I thought it was some sort of hormonal imbalance or whatever. And then I finally started listening to the people that had been coaching me and saying, you know, go and have a conversation. That taught me a lot, because I learned that I can't do it all myself, even as a 40-some-year-old, you know, man, which is, you know, difficult to realize. But I did realize at that point that I couldn't do it all myself. And what I learned was to be your best self, you have to fix yourself, and you have to work on yourself first. And so those are the things that probably challenged me the most, because just to put that into perspective, it was the exact same time that Corteva was forming. So I was going through and learned that I was suffering from depression at the same time that I needed to be on stage, 30, 40, 50 hours a week, getting people aligned and creating an organization. That was tough. Like, it was not easy, but I learned a lot from it.
It's funny, shout. So I had a conversation with a good buddy going through some rough stuff right now, literally yesterday for an hour, and his and I don't like to talk about myself very much. So his question to me is like, how do you keep it all under control? And I said, there's been a lot of days it's not under control. I just hide it well, right? But I said, you want to know what? And I don't have it completely figured out at all. But I'm 43 now, Bryce, and at 40, the one question, and I forget who posed it to me, that I spend a lot of time thinking about, and I've got a bunch of it nailed down, but I don't have it completely figured out. And I ask a lot of buddies this right now, and they can't answer it. Is like, what makes you happy, and what makes you feel valued? Mm-hmm. And I don't care if I find that middle-aged men are the worst for being able to answer it. Moms whose kids have just left the house, real hard time answering it. But like, and it's easy for us to say, I don't feel like I go to work every morning. Like I get up in a pretty good mood every morning. Like I love what I do. But so obviously being curious and using my brain makes me happy. But what else, right? And I find that a lot of people that are just buying things, they think it's going to make them happy, but it's not, right? So like one of my internal ones for me is like, I get true joy out of, you know, whether it's fixing problems or opening up doors for my wife and I and my kids to have experiences that we'll never forget, right? I think my kids will forget a dirt bike. Maybe, you know, they probably will sometime in their life. They'll learn some stuff, but they won't forget when we, did the tour to Dubai and met a bunch of the locals and understood how the UAE was built, and that every time Arabic music comes on, there's not a bomb. Right? I'm sorry, but in all the movies in North America, it's a bad thing. So I get a lot of joy out of that, right? But I think a lot of people, specifically men our age, have a real hard time answering what fills my happy, and what can people do for me that makes me feel valued, right? Because we spend a lot of time trying to make everybody else's life better as men. But sometimes if you don't tell people around you kind of what you need back every now and then you're welcome. Nobody's going to give it to you. Like one of our other guests said, right? You get up in the morning and the world doesn't owe you anything. It's not coming to save you.
I like that you brought that around, because now I can take it back to the retirement side. You said you're never retiring. I think this ties in, right, Bryce?
Yeah, no, and it was interesting when I was making that decision. So what you just talked about, Kristjan, is purpose, right? So you have to have a why, and my why was always, sitting right in front of me. And I think what triggered me at the time that I was getting to that point is, I was 43 years old, and I started to realize that my kids were, and this is the crazy part, you do a good enough job with your kids that they no longer need you, right? And my kids were not, they were not graduating from high school yet, but I sat there and watched them, and it's like, no, these are pretty stable young adults. They got their shit figured out, and you start to go through this change. But then as I was making the decision to rewire myself as I was, leaving Corteva, it really is, you got to have that purpose every day. You still got to get up every day. You still got to go and do things. And, I found over time that my purpose is to make things better for somebody each and every day. And I keep a tally. Have I done something today that's made something better and done something positive for somebody else other than myself? Because that's what I was starting to miss. I was starting to miss the reason for being was sitting down in my kitchen doing calculus homework, right? But they didn't need me to. They needed me to do the calculus homework when they started, and now they were teaching me calculus that I thought I knew coming out of university, that it's like, I don't even understand what these kids are talking about, and they're only in grade 12. Like, this is ridiculous. So the rewirement is, there's a whole list of things. We get one shot at this wonderful, life on earth. So let's go get some shit done. Like, what are you going to do about it? And let's go get some stuff done, and let's have some fun while we're doing it. So.
Go ahead, Hebes.
Finalize the questions. Yeah. So Bryce, there's always three I ask at the end. I say it's because they're interesting, but really it's partially because I'm selfish and it teaches me lots. But question number one: favorite book you've read recently?
Well, actually, I actually have a book that I just finished sitting on my desk, and it's called The End of Average by Todd Rose. That's a wonderful book. It's a short read. It's only a couple hundred pages. Todd Rose is, I think he's at Harvard. And anyways, it really is, it fits in with a whole bunch that we talked about today, actually, right? Averages are dangerous, and they're actually not the best way for you to manage just about anything, whether it's school, life, farms. Like, averages, it's wonderful to speak to averages, but we need individuals, right? And one of the things that we talked about earlier on was components of a team, and we need more crazies in our industry. Like, we need more crazies. We need more people that are like a full standard deviation outside, because they're going to be the ones that are going to help us actually grow this thing. And they're going to be the ones that are going to press upon us. So that's a really good book. If you get a chance, pick it up. It's a few years old. It's actually about a decade old. He's still speaking on it though. So you can actually see stuff on YouTube and things like that, but really, really good. And it's data based. So there is some data attached to it. Great book. One other book that I would recommend, if you haven't read it, is Outlive by Peter Attia. So as you get older, you start thinking about the bad things that you may have done to your body, and it's like, okay, is there any way to repair this shit or not? Right? Because the maintenance package on this sucker is not that good. So if you get a chance, read it. And there's a lot of sciencey stuff in there, but there's just some common sense things that he does. Of course, he's got a great podcast called Drive that gets way too technical. But I reread it actually just over the last month or so as I had a little bit extra time. So great, two really good books.
I still use the pilot example from End of Average with the U.S. Army pilot test where when they had a non-adjustable seat, the crash rate was ridiculous, and all they did was add adjustments back and forth and up and down, because the average measurement of a pilot, not one of, I think it was the 600 pilots, was average. Right. All they made was an adjustable seat, and it dropped the crash rate to like under 1%. Yeah. I still use the example till today.
Did you tell me to read this? Because what I'm doing is I'm just getting through to the books that people have told me, right? So I quit writing stuff because I was like, damn it, you people need to stop. Quit sending me books to read, because I already got like enough. But yeah, it's a great book.
Yeah,
it's a good one.
You should see my shelf. She's packed with stuff he sends me, and I haven't read half of it. But just
it's the joy of ADHD.
Yeah, one comment before you keep going. Alex Hermanzi, I listen to his podcast all the time, and his line was, to be exceptional, you have to be the exception. And I think that ties back to what Bryce was saying. Is like we need some crazies, because that's what actually drives us forward.
Yeah, 100%.
Question number 2, the best, one or two pieces of advice you've picked up over the years that, we all have one or two pieces that just stick with us, right? You got a couple?
Yeah. So I'll say that this is probably a component of my mom and dad, and then one of the best leaders that I worked for when I was working at Cargill. And the way that I would have broke it down, and I've used this actually with teams before, is so every day you need to break something, you need to fix something, you need to learn from it, and then you need to share what you learned. Right? It doesn't do anybody any good if you go break something and you don't tell people that you broke it and then tell them how to fix it. All you're going to do is perpetuate. And so that was good advice. Now it was there were a few more words that were used when my mom and dad, and when my dad said it, there were probably a few more 4-letter words that were said, but it does resonate, right? So that was one. And I think the other thing would be, and I'm thinking about the conversation we had earlier on about leadership. Your job as a leader isn't to build yourself, it's to build others.
Yeah.
That's what it is. And if you can do that every day, that ultimately that's a pretty cool spot to be. Yeah.
Agreed. Last question. If you had a magic wand and you could do one thing for agriculture right now that you think would have the biggest effect in the future, whether that be 5 years or 10 years or 50 years from now, what would you do? What would you fix? What would you do? What would you create? Doesn't matter.
If I had a magic wand.
I used to say if you were the ag minister, but the problem is he can't get it much done. So you don't have to bound yourself by policy or money. It's just like, if I could do this.
Same joke
Okay, so how about this? If I had a magic wand, I would find a way. So I would eliminate farm risk that's due to ignorance or isolation. How's that?
I don't disagree, but you got to expand so the listeners understand.
Yeah. So we're a product of our own environment in this industry, and we like to roll our sleeves up. And the good things about our industry is that, we get stuff done, and we roll our sleeves up, and you go do it, and you do it, and in many cases you're doing it in isolation or with ignorance. Meaning it's not that you don't want to know, it's just that you don't know what you don't know. And so when I think of ignorance, it's the data conversation that we had earlier on, right? There's all this data. Well, how do we take that ignorance of what that data actually could lead us to and enable it? We got to do that. We have to do that. Like there's no option B, it's option A. You got to go do it. And with that becomes predictive modeling and opening our eyes to all of that stuff. But the isolation part of it is also as important. So there's this ignorance that we have, and it's not a negative ignorance. It's just we know what we know, and sometimes we don't ask enough questions. The isolation is we get into our own little bubble, and we get thinking that what we're doing is unique, and we're remote. Like, how are we ever going to do this? So how do we eliminate the isolation by sharing information? But another part of that, and maybe this is where the magic wand would be, I'd love to be able to teleport people across the country that were subject matter experts to go fix problems on farms and be able to say, look, you only got an 8-hour day. Well, let's get you from Taber, Alberta, and let's get you over to, Birch Hill, Saskatchewan, and then let's get you back down to Mooseman, Saskatchewan, all in the same day, because you can go fix a problem with 3 different farms that in isolation, it would never happen. So if we could eliminate some farm risk by getting rid of ignorance and isolation, that would be a good thing.
Well, I think like 2 realistic examples that we deal with all the time. What are, we got real knowledgeable at ag insurance through our time at MNP, and then obviously I was on the board of GARS. And like there are a lot of farms that could sleep better at night knowing that they virtually can't lose money. It's just how much premium do you want to pay? But if you look at it as what can I sleep at night, willing to risk an equity versus what am I going to pay in premium? But what'll surprise them is the combination of agri-stability, government insurance, crop insurance, and privates. You can actually get that to a pretty reasonable number and almost be bulletproof, right? But a lot of people don't take the time to understand all 3 programs or go to a consultant. My other big learning was kind of just before COVID, was the utilization of 10-year bond rates for lending land mortgages. It was happening in commercial real estate all the time. But in agriculture, it virtually doesn't happen. I would say 0.01% of farms have any mortgages tied up on bonds. And there was, when we were buying land through COVID, I mean, there was lots of rumors going around in the area that the Chinese had bought me or there was money out there. No, I just figured out 10-year bond rates, and our mortgages are at like 1.7% for 10 years. So till 2030, there was that's a pretty good runway. But it was happening in commercial real estate all the time. So 2 things. One, I think farmers need to be less independent and ask curious questions up. And I also really encourage other industries to realize that there's some pretty big farm businesses and really good farm entrepreneurs that please be curious back and look for ways that industries can overlap. We don't actually need a whole bunch of new stuff in agriculture. There's a lot of things in other industries that could be applied here that we just don't make the assumption they can be applied.
And for me, it's the 2 things. A, we don't communicate. So, I mean, that applies to outside industry and inside industry. We, like you said, Bryce, we're kind of individualists. And the other one is we always used to call it learning to fly the plane while you're in the air, right? Hebes is everybody's so busy, like you said, Bryce, working and sleeves up in the dirt that they don't actually take the time to realize they're in the air right now. This is when we need to figure out how to land the plane. And it's just an analogy that has always stuck.
Well, and just to, I will give a little bit of a shout out to, the folks that I get to call family that are operating their little farm. And what's been really cool is as my nephews have gotten older and got an education and are in the middle of their education, it's freed up time for them to do a whole bunch of different things that were not thought of. And it's not, and I don't want to fill my nephews' heads with too much tire pumping, but what they brought to, my in-laws' farm is just this freedom to try some different things. And they're watching all of the stuff that's going on in the industry. The challenge at times, I think, for my brother-in-law is that they want to try and do everything at once, which doesn't work. But the great part is that they're looking to all outside sources to be able to say, how do we make this farm better? Which is something as an industry that I think we can do. But you need to be able to have time to do that. You have to create space to do that. So.
All right, Hebes, either we're getting really good or we're getting really bad because we just broke our old record, which we set 2 days ago. So we're at 1 hour 20. So let's pull this back, Bryce. I really want to We really appreciate the time you spent with us. Obviously, Kristjan's known you for a long time, and I've known you for a little bit. But just some of the learnings on leadership and stuff like that, it's nice to hear it from somebody who's been in the industry at such a high level. So we appreciate you coming on. Perfect. All right. Remember to like, share, subscribe, comment, and that's the Truth About Ag. Thanks for joining us. The Truth About Ag podcast is a proud member of the Hebert Group, which includes Hebert Grain Ventures, Maverick Ag, and Farmer Coach. We appreciate the support. Lastly, please like, comment, share, subscribe, and ring the bell. And if you have questions for a future podcast, please leave in the comments below. Thanks for listening.